Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by
Harry Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, West Michigan Eye Care Associates, Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Calder Financial, Grand Management Group, Encore Business Group, and Rydan Investments.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.
Stay informed and stay vigilant. Happy to bring on one of our favorites here. Figure this was a good way to kick off the season. We've got the Hall of Fame game this week. And, Doc, you know where we always start. It's National Milk Chocolate Day. We don't talk a lot about desserts, so I'm curious if you have a favorite chocolate or chocolate candy or dessert here.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know it was Milk Chocolate Day. Milk chocolate's not my favorite chocolate, a little bit too sweet, a little bit too creamy. For the darker ones or a mint chocolate, that's the way I would lean with that.
Gotcha. So like a York then?
Yeah, I do like those peppermint patties. Mint ice cream is great. Peppermint sprinkles on top of chocolate would be fine, but something a little bit spicier or darker than milk chocolate.
It's funny because when I was preparing to ask you about this, I kind of assumed that you would not like chocolate very much. That I didn't know that for sure, but we don't talk about a lot of desserts. You like the barbecue. And our last guest, I didn't even ask him because he came on last time on National. It was one pie. I think it was strawberry rhubarb pie. So I was asking everybody their favorite pie. And he didn't even like pies. He really didn't like sweets at all. So I didn't even ask him about the chocolate. And I thought, you know what? I'll bet Doc doesn't really get into the chocolate as much. But York's a good pick. I feel like that's a good one. That's refreshing.
Yeah, it is refreshing. And I like all kinds of food. So chocolate is good with me. I love desserts. Usually have my dessert for breakfast. We talked about this last year, that breakfast foods are mostly desserts. And when you're smoking meats and stuff, a lot of the bark, a lot of the rub you put on includes some sugar. So I'm 100% good with adding some sugar to foods and enjoying those sweets.
There's a great bit. I don't know if we've talked about this, but I always think of the Jim Gaffigan bit where he talks about pancakes and how it's just basically all the muffins and the pancakes. That's just an excuse to have those things for breakfast. Like just because we take the frosting off of them, then we're having breakfast. And then he has pancakes and then he eats them and he goes, well, looks like I'm going to call in sick for work today. I had pancakes.
That's right. Well, he's absolutely right. French toast, waffles, pancakes, muffins, donuts. Cereal is just dessert soup.
That's true. That's true. I didn't even think about it like that. Yeah, because it is amazing. That's funny. Well, see, we ended up in a good spot there from our first question, but I'm curious about your outlook on the season here because I know you've been writing more, which has been fun for me. I've been reading a lot of your Lions Wire stuff as I normally do, and I know you said at some point either in a tweet or in your Lions Wire column that it was kind of too early to be doing this return stuff for the injuries. We're not even in the season yet. We haven't even started the preseason. And obviously the big news was Owunzurike being out. That was a tough blow. It was a different injury. You had already written your injury preview for the defense, and he wasn't really in there so much because he had been good last year. But it sounds like this was something that was kind of in the works and then got worse after he was signed.
It's really amazing how they can keep a lot of these injuries secret throughout a 6-7 month off season. Owunzurike seemed like he was fine coming out of last year, played 17 out of 18 games. The Lions thought he was fine. They gave him $3.5 million guaranteed in March as an unrestricted free agent. Then at some point after that, ACL surgery. So it was very curious what happened there. And based on Dan Campbell's comments, it's not a straightforward ACL. There's definitely more to the story than that.
Levi was one of the big contributors, I thought, last year, and he was a great story overcoming all those back issues. We talked a lot about him because of that. It's it's curious to me. I'm wondering what you think about the timing of all that, because you kind of went through the timeline. Is there, because when he signed, I thought that was a below value contract. I know he's got the injury history, but even with that, he was under basically every estimate from every service that does that. And I'm wondering if that's what factored into it. If it was, I thought it was maybe the injury history, but I'm wondering if they found that and then, like you said, kept that quiet, but that's what kept that deal a little bit lower, both in terms of year and salary amount.
Right. I love the whole reading between the lines, analyzing what's going on behind the scenes, just based on what we see as from the public perspective. Levi's situation is a really fascinating example of this. There are many ways to read what might have been going on. As you mentioned, a very modest contract, only $3.5 million guaranteed for 1 year after coming off a pretty successful, reliable season. So what could explain that? As I had speculated in the past, he's coming off a 2022 L5S1 lumbar fusion. That's extremely rare to come back from, presents reliability problems going forward. I suspected it was related to that. But now with this new news that potentially he had some kind of ACL thing going on last season, and then it either got worse or he got it reevaluated and has changed his mind about the plan after free agency. Don't know for sure what's going on there. It's possible that all the other teams around the league knew about the knee issue, and that's what kept his market value down. Maybe the Lions decided to take a risk, or maybe they didn't fully were aware of what was going on, or it's hard to say. There are many, many possible explanations for this.
The comparison is interesting here of a couple of the contracts that they had over the last offseason, because when they signed Onwuzurike, I thought it was under market just like you did, but some of the same reasons, especially partly from talking to you and being more educated about this than most from following all your coverage and everything. But that compared to Barnes' deal seemed like a stark comparison to me, because I'm a big Barnes fan. I was on a different podcast here and they were talking about who I expected to break out this season, and the first guy that came to mind was Barnes, because you combine what happened in the early season along with his unique role on this team and the look for more pressure, for more sacks and more quarterback pressure. I think he's the guy that can generate some turnovers and kind of have maybe like an Andrew Van Ginkel kind of season for the Lions this year. But I still found it curious that they signed him to that much, because I want to talk about the dual effect. We'll probably talk about this after the break, the second part, but there's a dual effect to this. There's the comparison to Levi that we're talking about now, but there's also the idea that I think that contract made Anzalone feel a certain way, and so that contract has had multiple effects here, and I'm curious what you think of that one versus the Levi one, because that's a decent amount for a guy that is coming directly off of an injury, which Levi was not at the time.
Absolutely. This is a great example of where the Lions are going to tell you what to think about a player through their contract, not through their words. You really can't take what they say to the media too seriously. You can't take it at face value. But the contract, you absolutely can't take it at face value. So like you mentioned, Derek Barnes, unrestricted free agent, got a 3-year deal with the Lions, $16 million guaranteed, up to $25.5 million. So a pretty hefty deal for a guy who missed almost all of last season with an MCL, PCL. So what that tells us is they're very confident as far as his health, giving him a 3-year deal with that much guaranteed. You contrast that with Levi's contract, which only had $3.5 million guaranteed and was only 1 year. That's a huge difference, and that tells you what you need to know about their confidence level in the players going forward. They're both about the same age. Derek Barnes is 26, Levi's 27, so the age wasn't a big factor there. But in retrospect, they overvalued Levi based on what we know now. They probably took too much of a risk with Levi, knowing that there was something going on with his knee, possibly before he signed or last year.
That's interesting as a comparison here, because I was excited about Levi. I think he was going to be an important part of this line, and I think now they're trying to shuffle around to find some replacements, because that's one of the points of the defense and of the team as a whole. That's kind of the most in flux right now, between that injury, obviously Aleem's injury, and Davenport not being very confident in him. He's in the same category. He hasn't gotten hurt yet, and hopefully that yet never happens, but it's hard to be confident in his health until he has a full season here. We've talked about him a decent amount because he seems to bounce around. It's different injuries that don't seem to be part of any sort of chain, but then you worry about those individual injuries causing a chain at some point.
Yeah, with Davenport, he's missed almost the past 2 years due to injury. A couple of years ago was a high ankle sprain. Last year had a groin, then missed the whole year with an elbow, reportedly a triceps tear. But it's not just Davenport along the line that we're worried about. There are a couple of surprises at the start of camp with Josh Paschal on NFI with a cleanup surgery. He's out for a few weeks. And then Mekhi Wingo, which I expected to be back by now, with a reported meniscus tear back in November of last year. He's not going to be ready till September, possibly. So there are a lot of hits already at the defensive tackle, defensive line positions.
I keep expecting them to do something there. I want to talk about that and the linebacker situation, specifically with Anzalone and Barnes, what we were talking about there, what we were alluding to earlier after the break here, because I think those are both interesting storylines already before even starting the games. But we'll come back with Dr. Liao and get back into the Honolulu Blue Tent with him after the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.